Welcome back to my channel. That's not how I do my intro. Hey, hi, hello. Today we are going to be doing my balancing the books for May of 2021. I'm excited to get done with this because I no longer want to be thinking about how bad the month of May went for me. I understand that I have a different scale for good and bad throughout the month in regards to how my reading went, because for me, a bad month means I read less than 10 books. I understand that most people out there would probably kill to read, 9 books a month. This is just the reality I live in now. So this is the video where I go through all the books that I read for the month, which prompts I read them for my bingo board, and then how many books I bought and whether or not I got enough bingos for all of the books I bought. Spoiler alert, normally I don't say this until halfway through the video, but I bought more books than I got bingos for, and this is the first time ever since playing bingo that I have had to take a punishment. It's really sucky, but in good news, it's kind of cool that I get to see what the punishments are for the first time. So I chose my 2 punishments because I bought 2 books more than I read in the month of May. And if you want to know about that, all about it, what my board ended up looking like, you can go watch my TBR for June. I do that first before I even start anything else. So you just need to watch like a few minutes of that video, and then you can come right back here and let me talk about all of the books I read. These are the 2 physical books that I read this month, not including all of the audiobooks that I got through. And these are all the physical books I bought this month, not including all of the audiobooks that I bought. I'm gonna be having my handy dandy notebook with me because I cannot remember all of the books that I read this month. So I won't be going through the whole month because now I'm doing my wrap-ups and my TBRs a little bit differently, where I'm no longer going from the 1st of the month to the 30th or 31st of the month. I'm going from whenever I play bingo to whenever I play bingo. Last month when I did my wrap up, I was starting to do that, but I decided to do all of the books I had read in April. So 2 of those books actually counted towards May's bingo, but the last week of this month, I was not counting towards May's bingo. So even though I read some books, I will not be counting them towards this video. I will talk about them next month's next wrap up. So I know it gets a little confusing, but for me, it just makes sense. And I started to realize that the strict month-to-month system I was doing just didn't work for me. So we're switching it up. So this month, according to my notes, I read part of at least 11 books. 2 of those were DNFs, so 9 books, and one of those is a book that I put on pause, Words of Radiance, because I'm slowly making my way through it on my reread. So I technically finished 8 books this month, which is just crazy. I can't remember the last time I only read 8 books in a month. I'm ridiculously busy right now. If you go and watch my weekly vlogs, you'll know that I am currently in the process of moving, and that is taking up a lot of my free time. Starting at the top of the month, I read The Golem and the Jinni, which I am reading for a secret TBR video, which I have no clue when that's going to be coming out, to be completely honest. I thought I knew, and then this whole entire lack of reading really threw me for a loop. So I'm just not sure, but it will be coming eventually. So since I don't know when it's coming, I will talk briefly right now about the book so that you guys can understand a little bit more about it, and I'll leave some of the details though for that video. The Golem and the Jinni is about 2 characters. It's an historical fiction fantasy book. It really read more like an historical fiction with some paranormal elements. So we are following this woman who is a golem, and she is created by this rich man to be her bride, and he takes her across the ocean to America. He's trying to leave oh my goodness, where was it? I don't remember where he was trying to leave in Europe, but he's trying to leave, and he is of Jewish descent. And so on the trip to America, he dies right after resurrecting his golem. And so she is left with this need to fulfill her master's wishes, but doesn't have a master. And so she starts being able to understand everyone's wishes around her and starts to try to fight the need to fulfill everyone's wishes. And she falls in with some different people, and it's definitely some found family elements. We're also following this Jinni who was trapped, I don't remember how long ago, but let's say a few thousand years ago in Syria, and the bottle that he was trapped in has been brought to America through different ancestors passing it down the line, and one day he is woken up in a metal worker's shop and he doesn't have all of his old abilities, and he's basically trying to lay low and live his life as best as he can, and the two of them meet up with each other and start becoming unlikely friends. What I really enjoyed about this book was I just read too much YA, and I kind of assumed that these two characters would be love interests. They were not. They weren't. Both of them had love interests unrelated to each other, and both of them had successes and failures and just had their whole arc relating to themselves. The villain character was really interesting because not only do we get the main two POVs of these two characters, but you also get POVs from minor characters and you get the villain's main POV. And so you're kind of following these two, but you're also following a lot of other people, and it's really cool to see how all the different storylines connect, because some of them are ancient storylines and some of them are more modern, and by more modern I mean 1899 when this story takes place. It was really fascinating. It's definitely a really slow book. So you'd be going with the plot and then all of a sudden we'd stop, and for 100 pages you'd be reading about this ice cream man and how he started getting seizures, or why he can no longer make eye contact with someone. And so that really slowed down the plot of the story, but I found myself more fascinated by the characters and learning about them and the world building than I cared about the plot. And honestly, when I think back about how the plot resolved, the book really wasn't about the plot. It was about these characters and how they all interacted with each other and the struggle of minorities in America and how that can be related to paranormal elements. So I ended up rating the book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think I liked it more than that, to be completely honest, now that I'm looking back. But I know when I was reading it, I found it very, very long, and I kind of wanted to wrap up shorter, so I won't be changing that. Next, I read The Bad Beginning by Lemony Snicket. I actually read The Bad Beginning, whatever the sequel is. Oh my God, what's the sequel? Oh, The Reptile Room and The Wide Window. I also read The Miserable Mill, but not for this video. So I read the first 3 series of Unfortunate Events. They're all rereads, by the way. I rated the first book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I rated the second one a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I rated the third one a 3.75 out of 5 stars. My biggest issue with the first book is it really does feel ableist, and it really feels like it's teaching kids to not like people who are different than them. I think it's a great story and a great series about inclusion and about accepting people, and there is a lot of development with some of the villains and how they are perceived throughout the series. But the first one just really makes it so that, you know, the person with hook hands and the person whose gender you can't tell and the person who's overweight and bald and the person who puts on too much makeup, and it just makes them the villains, and I don't love that look. But it is a great story for children, which, by the way, if you don't know what the series of Unfortunate Events are about, it is about the Baudelaire orphans. There are 3 children, Violet, Klaus, and Sunny, and right after their parents die, they are left with this man named Count Olaf, and he is an awful man who is just trying to steal their fortune. And after book 1, they're passed from guardian to guardian, each book getting a different guardian or a different setting, and Count Olaf always shows up trying to steal their fortune from them. There are 13 books, and they are very tragic and sad, and in fact, the first book opens up with, if you are wanting a happy ending, turn away, because this book is not for you. There is a TV series on Netflix. I am currently rewatching it while I'm rereading the books to see kind of how that affects my experience. Next, I read In the Ravenous Dark, which I did a whole video on, so I really won't get into too much detail about it here, but this is the story of a mage, an unbound mage, and in this realm, mages are bound to spirits, and these spirits are supposed to protect them from other people and to protect other people from them. She watches in the first chapter her father die in front of her from the soldiers coming and trying to capture him and bind him to a spirit. And then we pick up really shortly after where she is captured by soldiers and brought to the palace and forced to live amongst the royalty and live amongst them and be warded and try to deal with all of that shit and trying to escape. It was a really enjoyable book. I really liked it. I think that it was better in the first half than the second half, but I think that a lot of people would really like this. I was drawn to it because the main character is in a polyamorous relationship and is pansexual, and I always love seeing more diversity in fantasy books, and I think that this one had that and was a really good representation, because beyond that we also had a lesbian character, a gay character, an asexual character, a transgender character, or were they non-binary? Non-binary, I believe they were both actually. And I loved seeing the relationship between our main character and her ward. You know, it was kind of this enemies to lovers relationship. I mean, it's pretty obvious from the beginning that that's what it's going to be. I also really enjoyed learning more about this world. There are characters that have this like really cool multicolored hair, and the different relationship between the different countries was brought up. I think that it could have been developed more and been more focus on like the political intrigue of the book, which is really funny because I don't think I've ever said that before, but I wanted like a little bit more from the relationship between the two countries to know why they hated each other beyond this like one little thing that happened. I mean, it wasn't little, but it kind of was. So I ended up rating that book a 4 out of 5 stars because I really, really enjoyed it, but I felt like it could have just been like a little bit more. Next, I was starting to pick up on the fact that I was slumping really, really hard. So I picked up The Sleeper and The Spindle. I just realized I haven't told you what I've been reading, like what prompts I've been reading these books for. You can go back and watch all my vlogs if you want to know. I go into very high detail about it there. So The Sleeper and the Spindle I picked up, which is by Neil Gaiman, and it's a very short book, and it's narrated by him, but it also has a full cast where there's like sound effects and everything. I listened to the audio, if you can't tell from me just saying that, and I really freaking enjoyed it. So far, it's my favorite Neil Gaiman book I've ever read, but I've had very mixed opinions about his books. In the past, there have been some I've hated, there have been some I felt meh about, and there's been one beyond this one that I've really, really enjoyed. So I don't know where I stand with him. I think I'd be willing to give his books another shot, but I just don't know for sure like what I actually want to read by him because it's been so varied. So I really enjoyed this. This was a Sleeping Beauty and Snow White retelling where Snow White is now the queen of the realm and hears about Sleeping Beauty's curse and goes to save her. It was so good. It was such a twist on the classic tales, and it was so feminist, and oh my god, I just loved it. And it was so short, like I would reread this book. It was so fantastic. I don't even know what else to say about it because it's such a short book, but I rated it 5 out of 5 stars, and it is very, very easily my favorite book that I read this month. Like, I don't even know. Yeah, it's the only book I rated 5 out of 5 stars, which is so odd for me, to be completely honest. Normally I rate a few books 5 out of 5 stars each month, but I think that just goes back to this month I was busy and slumping and not reading as much. But I highly recommend this one. Go check it out. Next, I started and DNF'd Awakens. I guess that could be part of my physically read pile, but I shipped it to a friend because we're doing a pass the book thing and it's my book pick. So I really hated this book. I really hated this book. I made it 180 pages in, I think, which is over halfway before I DNF'd. I think it was like 60% through. Oh boy, it was just very tropey, very YA, felt poorly written. The dialogue was just bad. And it's funny because the author's note in the beginning said that she wrote this book never planning on publishing it, and I feel like it showed. Oh my god. I feel like a lot of people would like it just because of the themes that the book had, but the writing, I could not get past the writing. So this is the story of a girl who finds out that she is a sorcerer, and in this land being a sorcerer is a bad thing because they're basically like secret government spies and no one wants to do that, and she is a librarian. Finds out that she's a sorcerer and then gets paired up with this teacher who is like the prince of the realm, and there's like 2 princes of the realm. One of them is really nice and one of them is really mean, and she gets paired up with a really mean one, but she has a crush on the really nice one, and this one's teaching her things and he's really cruel to her, but like she was so weak and submissive that I like didn't care about his cruelty. Normally I'm all there for cruel characters, but it just didn't balance each other well. And she of course is this like long lost air magician that like there are no more air magicians ever around. It really stole the plot of Avatar: The Last Airbender and mixed it with just bad writing. I just did not like this book at all, and I wanted to DNF from the first page, but I pushed myself because it was a buddy read, and I wish I hadn't. I wish I had DNF'd on the first page, because now I have all of this information in my head and it is just not gonna help me ever in life, and I don't know what to do with it. So I DNF'd, but if I had finished, oh my god, I don't even know what I would have rated the book, but it would have been low. It would have been so low. And apparently there's like 5 or 6 books in this series, and I'm like, how? I read ACOWAR, and I did a whole video on this one, so if you want to know all my thoughts and opinions and details, go watch that. I won't even go into detail here because this is the 3rd book in the series, so I can't really tell you the plot of it. I enjoyed it, but not as much as I enjoyed the 2nd book. I enjoyed it more than the 1st book. I ended up reading, what did I rate it? I ended up rating it a 3.75 out of 5 stars, and I tabbed the whole thing. So go watch that video if you want to know anything. But it does have spoilers, so if you don't know the plot of the book or the first 2, I will be spoiling it for you. Next, I read Matched, which was a reread from my childhood. This will also be part of a video which will be coming out who knows when. I have plans for it, and I filmed like the first book, Matched, for it, but the other 2 books that I need to read for it, I am going to be struggling through. So it might be a little bit before you see that video, so I'll go into some more detail here about it. Matched is the story of this dystopian, utopian YA futuristic society where everything is planned for you, including who you're going to marry. And our main girl turns 16 in the book, and so she goes through her matching ceremony and ends up getting matched to her best friend. When she goes to plug in the information about her best friend, because they're given this little micro card to learn any information, of course she already knows everything about him but plugs it in anyways, and when she does, there is a different boy on the screen, and then it quickly flashes and it's her match. Now, she, weirdly enough, knows the other boy that was on the screen, and she starts to question whether or not she is supposed to be matched to him or matched to the boy that she's actually matched to. And she's kind of put into this situation where she's just not sure for the rest of the book. Now, when I originally read this book, I was in middle school, which is definitely like a way more age-appropriate time to read this book than what I am right now. And I really hated it then. I actually DNF'd it a few times before finally just like finishing up the book. So this time I didn't have any problems with DNF. There wasn't a moment in the book where I was like, wow, I really want to DNF this. I'm hating this book. But it definitely was like a simpler YA book. It left me with enough questions that I want to move on to the sequel, but I don't also want to move on to the sequel because like I don't know if I can put up with our main character with what I know she's going to be doing in the sequel book, because I just don't care. I don't care enough to watch her like wander through the wilderness trying to find someone. Boy. So the book was pretty tropey. The book was very like obvious. There's not going to be like twists and turns. You're not going to be surprised by it. It's pretty face value, but it doesn't mean that it was a horrible book either. I felt like it was just very net through most of the story for me, and I ended up rating it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I didn't believe the love interest or the backup love interest. I didn't believe the love triangle at all. I didn't totally believe the society either. I just feel like I know humans, and I feel like with a lot of dystopian books, one of the things they forget is how anti-humans can be and how much humans don't want to follow rules. For what it was, if I just ignore all of that, it was a very enjoyable, simple book, and I ended up rating it a 2.5 out of 5 stars, which I kind of feel like a 2.5 in my mind isn't a bad book. Like, it's very middle road rating. Then I read Memento, which is the short story novella that takes place before Illumine. It is part of the Illumine series. It's all about Adian and how he like came to be the kind of psychotic, demented AI that he is, the man that we love and know today. I really enjoyed this short story, actually. I feel like I could have had almost more of it. That was probably my biggest complaint, because our main girl, we just don't get to know her well enough to feel anything for her. So when they make these like revelations about the stuff that she does like later in the book, it's not shocking to me because I just don't feel for her and I didn't care. But learning about how Adian started to like think of himself as an I instead of an it, and how he started to realize things like the trolley problem, and how he started to think about like needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the greater good outweighs the needs of the many, was really interesting, and I really enjoyed that. So we're basically following this one girl as she starts to work with Adian, and she is like assigned to help him understand moral problems because that's what she's been studying studying, and then they get to know each other in ways that you never expected, I guess. I don't know. That makes it sound sexual. It wasn't sexual. I enjoyed it though. I rated it a 4.5. I don't have much more to say about it, to be completely honest. So we're gonna move on. Next, I read The Curse of Roses, which I DNF'd about 30 to 40% through, so I'm counting it towards my board. I didn't love this book because it just felt too, what was the word I used before? Too convenient. The plot progressed because the author needed the plot to progress, not because anything made sense for the plot to progress. This is the story of a girl who is cursed with every food item that she touches turns to roses, and she's living in this starving land, and only like her guards know about this curse, and she has been sent off in an arranged marriage to this prince who's about to be king, or he is a king and he's trying to marry a queen, so she's going to marry him and he doesn't know about it. She goes on this journey to find this witch who is supposed to be able to lift her curse, and the witch can't lift her curse, so the two of them fall in love. I'm only telling you what happens up to the first 30%. It was just so convenient how everything worked out perfectly. I loved the fact that it was an LGBTQ plus retelling. I loved the fact that we were studying a culture I'm not super familiar with. We were taking place in Portugal. I loved the author's note. Oh my God, the author's note at the beginning of the book, 5 out of 5 stars. Just go read the author's note. It was so impactful and good. But I didn't like our main character. She was just kind of passive for the most part. And I understand her situation, and I totally feel like she was going to grow out of it as the story developed and as her character developed. But I just couldn't get past the fact that everything just worked out how we needed it to work out, and that like nothing made sense. There was no motivation for any of the characters to be doing the things that they were doing. I would read future books by this author. I really feel like this is kind of a debut, and it's being judged harshly. Even though it is a debut by myself, it's being judged harshly. But I think that the author, needed this starting point, and I think she's going to go great places. So I would check out future books by her. Finally, the last book I read for this wrap up was The Ruin of Kings. Heck, I loved this book. This was so fantastic. I really, really, really enjoyed this book. There were some confusing elements that happened near the end, which was the only reason why I didn't rate this book a 5-star, because I got so like, what? And there were so many parts I had to go back and reread. And I know that the author did that on purpose, but I was just a little too lost for my own preference. I don't mind being lost, but I was like too lost for what I would have liked. But I loved it, and I rated it a 4.75 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend this series. It reminded me so much of so many other epic and high fantasy books that I have read, but it was written by a woman, and I felt like that was so obvious that even though we're following our main protagonist is a male character, it felt like I could tell that it was written by a woman. The way that the characters spoke about each other and the way that they talked was just refreshing, and I really enjoyed it. So we're following this main boy named Kieran, and we start at the very beginning of the story, and there's this letter to the emperor, the ruler, the empress. So it says, "Your Majesty," and you start out by reading, and it says that in this book, you will read the stories that I, the narrator, listened to on this rock between a prison guard and a prisoner. And then you start out the story with Kieran and Talon in a prison cell. And Talon is the guard and Kieran is the person in jail. And Talon asks Kieran for him to tell her a story. And she wants the story of how he got into this prison cell. So then she hands him this rock, this magical rock, and he talks into it and tells the story of how he came to be who he was. And then the rock is passed to Talon every other chapter, and she is a mimic, which is this creature that can, when she is near people, can absorb their look and their memories, and she can mimic who they are. And so she starts to tell the story of where Kieran's life actually started from the perspective of everyone else in his life, because she has gone and absorbed all of their memories. So the whole entire book is the story of this man who's listening to this rock telling us, the Majesty, the story of Kieran in the jail cell learning what Talon is revealing about his loved ones, but also Kieran's past according to him, and also Kieran's past according to Talon. And it was crazy. It was so good. It was so fantastic. So Kieran is able to use and see magic. And his storyline takes us from when he is bought and sold as a slave to this Black Brotherhood. And they bought him because they think that first off, their whole entire mission in life is to buy slaves and free them. But also they think that he can do some good for them. And they bring him to this island where he can learn his magic best. We're also following Talon's story. She backs up a few years from Kieran was like younger, and he first stole this gem, and it's this match to this gem that his mother left him. He's an orphan on the streets. He steals it, and these men come after him and hunt him down and think that he might be this lost royal son that they had. And it's not a spoiler because from the beginning you know that it's true that he is actually the lost son. The jail cell scene tells you that. And then that story leads up to when he was a slave. The slave story leads up to when he was captured as a prisoner, and then the prisoner story ends catching us up to when this narrator got the rock and understood the whole entire story. And I just feel like my mind has been blown. It was fantastic. I highly recommend this. My book club read this together. It was our pick, and we are planning on reading the rest of the series, but we're not going to get to it until 2022 when the next book comes out. So I'm really excited about that, and I can't wait. I'm really concerned about how it's going to be done because this one, the thing that drew me in was that storytelling aspect, and that got wrapped up in this book. But I've heard that apparently the author keeps it going, and there is the first chapter of the next book at the end of this one, so I might read that soon, just peek at it to see how I think she's going to be doing it because I'm so freaking excited. Also, this paperback was so pleasant to read because of how floppy it was. I freaking loved it. The entire experience was great. So that's the last book I'm going to be talking about this month. I did read 5 more books and then DNF'd 2 more, I think. Oh, no. I read 5 more books. I DNF'd 1 and I'm currently reading 1, which I'll be finishing later today, but all of those are going towards June. So in theory, I read more than 8 books this month, but towards the bingo, that's it. So now we got to pull up all of the books I bought this month and talk about them. I did buy A Curse of Roses, but since I gave it an honest attempt, it doesn't count towards bingo. Then I also bought A Dance with Thieves, which does count towards bingo. So that is my first book on the board. Then I bought Realm Breaker by Victoria Aveyard, which I am really excited to be getting to finally. I will be reading that next month, so stay tuned if you want to see that. I don't have much to say about this book. I think it's Chosen One, YA fantasy trope. I read Red Queen by her, so I wanted to pick up her next one. So this is the second book that goes towards my tally. Then I bought Empire of Sand, which I already owned the audiobook for, so this doesn't count towards anything, but I am really excited to be picking this one up also next month. Cannot wait. Wanted to get to it this month, just didn't have the time / didn't have the motivation to do it. I also bought The Ruin of Kings this month, but as I read it, it doesn't count towards anything, so we're still only at 2 for right now. Then I bought From Blood and Ash, which I already owned the audiobook for, so it doesn't count for anything. Then I bought A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire and whatever this one is called, A Crown of Gilded Bones, which I did not own previously and did not read this month, so that's 2 more books bought towards bingo. Oh, these are not gonna stay. That's weird. Crown of Gilded Bones has like a different texture than Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. Like these 2 are kind of like a matte, and this is like more glossy. That's weird. Okay, I know that's chaotic. We're just gonna keep talking. So I did get 2 bingos this month. So I switched reading journals this month as well. So everything looks kind of differently, but I ended up getting a bingo down and across. So 2 bingos, which means that covers 2 of my books. So originally I was planning on doing a system where if I bought books and I didn't read them, or if I bought books more than I had bingos for them, that I would have to read them the next month and they wouldn't count towards bingo. I started to realize I think that's a little bit unfair for just how busy I am, because that makes sense in a month where I'm not slumping and I'm not like moving, but it doesn't make sense when I take into consideration the rest of my life and how it's going. So I decided that I would write up some punishments instead and take one of those. And I have to take a punishment for every single book that I buy and don't have a bingo for. So I had to take 2 punishments this month. So the punishment I ended up taking was on my bingo board, there are 4 slots in the center, which are yellow. let me go get my bingo board for you. Oh, but then you're gonna know already how my month is going. If you watch TBR Bingo every single month, you'll know that I have 4 slots in the center, which are buddy reads or book club books. And those are books that are picked by other people for me to read every single month. I have that there so that I don't have to worry about trying to fit my book club books into TBR Bingo. And I know that they're already taken care of and I don't have to like stress about it. So not having that availability means I have to fit my book club books into prompts, which they might not fit, which means they might not get into TBR Bingo, right? So I decided that for those 4, 2 of them, one for each book that I bought and didn't read for, should be taken by something that is not picked. So I decided to have them fit the 2 books that I currently have on my pause shelf, which are Red Sister and Malice. So that means if I read and finish those books, I count them towards the board like normal, everything is fine. But if I don't, it's the same thing as if I hadn't read a book club or a buddy read. I don't get to take that slot off. The real punishment is in the fact that I now have to fit my book club books into other prompts, and that stresses me out because then I can't fit other books into those prompts. That's kind of what my bingo board looks like. You can go watch that. This video really is in conjunction with my video that came out last Friday, which is my TBR Bingo for the month of June. So if you're confused at all in this video, just go watch that one and I explain all of the little details. That's it for this month. This is my first month taking a punishment. So if you guys have any other recommendations for punishments below, I already have a few thoughts, to be completely honest. I'd love to know if you've read any of these books, what you thought about them, any of your opinions, how your month of May went. Did you read all the books you wanted to read? Did you feel like you failed? Like I feel like I failed a little bit, but no one fails in reading, you know? Even if you don't read, you didn't fail, you just didn't read. That's it for me. I enjoyed talking to you guys immensely. I hope you check back in the future. I don't remember how my outro goes, but until next time, I'll talk to you in the comments. Bye.